No, I didn't freeze. It's just me. Instead of wearing the nose, I was pretending that No, your internet is not buffering. I'm buffering. Hey, so today's not going to be a long chat because, hello, Nicholas, because, man, we had a long one the other day with Peter Erskine and Adam Nussbaum, and it was awesome, and it's impossible to top that. So I'm not even going to try. But today I just thought I'd jump on here for a few minutes and talk about a few drummers, have you guys talk about a few drummers. In fact, I think we should really talk about the drummers that you want to talk about, is what I'm thinking. So often, you know, we talk about, you know, all the great drummers that we all know and love. Ringo and Charlie Watts and Steve Gadd and Rick Marotta and Peter and Adam and all these great drummers. Oh, thanks, Darren. I'm actually gonna read the comments from my computer, see if this works. Might be easier. Anyway, so, hey, Joe DeCroto, good to see you, brother. Anthony, was hoping you'd make it. Hi, Rich. So anyway, I was thinking maybe you guys might want to, guys and gals, because Penny Lane is watching, I see now too. Guys and gals might want to talk about some drummers that tend to fly under the radar, you know, and I can kind of get it started. I have a few guys that come to mind. And it's kind of a slippery slope because I could name 15 or 20 drummers that I feel are like unsung heroes, you know, that fly under the radar. And then you guys could come up with another 100, I'm sure. You know, it's one of those things where I know I'm going to leave out a lot of people that I'm going to be sorry that I left out. But just people that influenced me when I was growing up. And I've talked about these guys a lot. But Gary Mallaber, who is probably most well known for Carlos Vega. Thank you, Nicholas. I was definitely going to get to Carlos, and this isn't in any kind of you know, order. It's not like from best to worst, or you know. But Gary Mallaber was a huge influence on me through his work with the Steve Miller Band in the '70s, and you know, he's on the Fly Like an Eagle and Book of Dreams records, which were basically the same. It was the same record with a whole bunch of outtakes. So they made Book of Dreams a year or two later. They released it, but they were basically outtakes from Fly Like an Eagle. So all from the same sessions. But Gary Mallaber was the drummer on, you know, Take the Money and Run and Rockin' Me and the song Fly Like an Eagle. Amazing drummer. And what I found out later about Gary when I started to research him and learn about him in the 70s and 80s is he was the drummer that played on Van Morrison's Moondance record, the entire record, not just the song Moondance, but the entire record. And that to me has some of the most beautiful drumming. I mean, just, I would call it exquisite drumming. Crazy Love and Love Caravan and Into the Mystic, you know, all those songs that are on that Moondance record. And Gary at the time, I think was about, I think he was like 22 or something, 20 or 22. He's really young, but played so maturely. And of course the song Moondance was his sort of nod to Joe Morello's Take Five, you know, has that little kind of Take Five feel to it. Yeah, so I'm seeing excellent names. Joe Vitale, somebody mentioned Joe Vitale. Darren mentioned Joe Vitale. And boy, I'd love it if Joe was watching. Joe's my Facebook buddy, and he's on here sometimes. Chris Rollis, Johnny Rollis, my brother. Joe is just another one of those guys that's played on a million records, like between Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and all, you know, so many of the Joe Walsh hits from the 70s, and incredible feel. For the longest time, the song Southern Cross, which is one of my absolute favorite songs of any song in the world, CSN song, Southern Cross, David Crosby on vocals. I just, you know, for the longest time, I assumed it was Jeff Beccaro because, and Joe is watching. Joe, I'm talking about you right now, my friend. And just talking about how, speaking of and you know what, I will say this. I want to be clear about this too, in terms of the definition of unsung heroes. I wouldn't consider Joe Vitale unsung, because if someone doesn't know who Joe is, that's on them. If you're a drummer, you need to know who Joe Vitale is. It's that simple. But to the point I think other people are making, you know, we'll say that he's an unsung hero. I'm always saying nice things, Joe. Anyway, and Joe, I've told you this story probably more than 100 times, but you know, when I first heard Southern Cross on the radio in 1981, I would say it probably was 81, 82. It sounded like Jeff to me, and I just sort of had it in my head that it was him. And I didn't know much about you at the time. I'm talking to Joe Vitale right now, other than your work with. I knew you had been playing and were playing with Joe Walsh, of course, and then I realized that was you on that song. And as I studied your playing more, I realized, yeah, absolutely. And Joe has that groove and that feel, man, that like, come on, you know, you can't just sit down and play that tune and have it sound like that. Absolutely not. Anyway, so Joe's a great example, you know, of a guy that, again, I won't say he's an unsung hero, because he's a hero to me, and I've known who he is for a long time. But if you don't know who he is, you need to check him out. And Steve Todd is saying Jeff Porcaro, but again, you know, the definition being an unsung hero, if you don't know who Jeff Porcaro is, then you need to really rethink. And I'm Steve Todd, I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying if someone isn't aware of who Jeff was, they need to find out. Because I think he's right up there with Steve Gadd and, you know, all the absolute greats as one of the all-time greatest drummers. So without a doubt. The other guy that I talk about a lot, I've mentioned Gary Mallaber, I've mentioned Joe Vitale, who's watching, which is a great honor, is the drummer that played on Peter Frampton's records in the 70s, a guy named John Siomis. He's on Comes Alive, and he also played on Todd Rundgren's Hello, It's Me. I don't know if he played on other songs by Todd Rundgren, but he's on that song, which is a really early influential song for me. I mean, 1972, I think, when I first started getting interested in drums, and hearing that, and even being, you know, 11 years old, almost 12 years old, I totally appreciated the sort of subtlety of what he was playing on that song. Stanley Sheldon's watching. Stanley is the bass player that played with Peter Frampton during that time, also on Comes Alive, and you know, rhythm mate with John Siomis. And Stanley and I have talked a lot about John, so anyway, yeah, it's you know, you could tell there was something really special. And I remember when the Comes Alive record came out in '76, I listened to that record, like I got it in the springtime, I think, maybe April of 1976, and played it nonstop, like for 6 months. I just listened to it from 2 albums, you know, side to side to side to side, and just totally soaked in his drumming. I mean, it was just like, and being pretty young at the time, and I'd been playing only a couple of years. The guys that I'd been listening to before that, like Ringo and Charlie Watts, and even John Bonham, you know, there wasn't a lot of syncopation. There wasn't a lot of sort of, hi David Kilty. Thanks, buddy. You know, I totally recognized that there was a lot more going on there, and it opened my eyes to just this other part of drumming that I kind of really hadn't exposed myself to yet. And it was probably about that time that the Fly Like an Eagle album came out in the spring of '76, and I started to listen to Gary Mallaber a lot. And I started listening to just people that were a little bit of a left turn from, you know, my first influences that for the first 2 years that I was playing drums, that's all I listened to were like Ringo and Charlie and John Bonham and Keith Moon and there was this whole other world of great drummers out there. Another guy that I've talked about him before, and I'll just throw it out there, and anybody else that wants to mention some names, I'm going to just look at my computer. Joe Vitale did in fact play with Peter Frampton. He did. Joe's played with everybody. Absolutely. I saw Joe the first time. Joe, I don't know if I met you in '93. Jimmy Capone, my old buddy from Melrose, Steve Smith, Journey, yes, great all-around drummer, for sure. I wouldn't call Steve an unsung hero. I would call him a highly celebrated hero. But absolutely, to your point, Prairie Prince also, great suggestion. But anyway, I met Joe in '93 on this tour. My friend Marty Farrer was playing drums with Glenn Fry, and Joe was playing. It was a double bill with Glenn Fry and Joe Walsh. And Joe was playing with Joe, Joe was playing with Joe. And I think, Joe, you were playing keyboards as well on a bunch of tunes. Anyway, absolutely floored me. And, that was almost 30 years ago. Again, I'm not going to be the Facebook police about it, I promise. But again, Simon Phillips, an absolute monster, a very dear friend of mine, not someone I would consider an unsung hero. I would consider Simon to be, I consider him to be considered amongst the very best. So, okay, Gene Chrisman, absolutely. I was going to get to Gene. And I'd even say Jim Gordon to some degree because of, Jim's situation now, and that he's been off the scene now for so long that probably not a lot of people realize who he is. But Jim Gordon, absolutely, and Gene Chrisman played on all the big Memphis records in the 60s and 70s with the Memphis Boys, and that leads me to Roger Hawkins, who was the Muscle Shoals staff drummer. Played on a million hit records in the 60s and 70s and 80s. It's not Bernard Purdie, in fact, but it's Roger Hawkins who plays on Aretha Franklin's Respect. He plays on the Staple Singers' Respect Yourself. He's on Bob Seger's Main Street. If you think of like that restrained cross stick, really beautiful groove from Bob Seger's Main Street, that's Roger Hawkins. He's on, I can look up his discography in this book I have in front of me. I'm just trying to jog my memory. He's also on like Paul Simon's Kodachrome, that cool little beat where he's playing the rim, I don't know what he's playing, but anyway, played on a million great songs. Yeah, I'm seeing some good names. John Guerin, another great name. John Guerin is a guy that was part of the LA scene, movie soundtracks, TV shows. Steve Schaefer is another guy who could actually be watching right now, a very good friend. Yeah, I'll Take You There. Chris Brady also played on I'll Take You There and Respect Yourself. But Steve Schaefer played on all those like TVs, those awesome, if you watch any old TV shows like I do, and like the Rockford Files and all those cool 70s detective shows. Harry, you like my glasses? I'll let you borrow them. But that, Steve Schaefer did a bunch of those TV shows, and into the 80s too. I mean, Steve is a phenomenal drummer, but like I said, movie soundtracks, jingles, back when TV commercials actually had bands playing. Yeah, I'm seeing some great names. Irv Kotler, Frank Sinatra's longtime drummer. Excellent suggestion there, Mike Powers. Ron Tutt, also great drummer, played with Elvis. Neil Diamond's current live drummer. Yeah, Ed Shaughnessy, sure, I guess you could say Ed was, I think Ed certainly was respected and people knew who he was, being on the Tonight Show all those years, but you could put him in that category. I kind of look at it like two different ways, that if you're a young player just coming up right now, John Guerin, Rockford Files, Streets of San Francisco, Hawaii 5-0. There it is right there, yeah. But if you're a young drummer and you're just starting out right now, you'd really have to do your homework to learn about these guys, because some of them aren't with us anymore, and it's kind of a different world now. Or if they're not making records right now, then you might not know who they are. But I would encourage you to like listen to older tunes, whether it's rock or jazz or fusion music from the 70s or TV shows, and the information's out there. You can find out who these drummers were and get hip to them. Like my friend Rich Farrago was saying, Earl Palmer. You know, Earl is another great example. Again, of a guy that Earl was like, to me, one of the founding fathers of rock and roll drumming, probably the founding father of rock drumming. So, yeah, Benny Benjamin. Yeah, there you go. Jimmy Capone. Giving me some good names here. Nigel Olsson, too. I'm just reading these names as they come across. Excellent suggestions. Nigel, I would consider an unsung hero. But Earl, I mean, like, I don't want to offend anybody, but if you don't know who Earl is, you really need to find out. You really need to just, like, dig in and find out who he played on, Little Richard stuff that I was talking about. Tons of, 60s pop, like the Righteous Brothers and bands like that. He was kind of, him and Hal Blaine, they were the wrecking crew. I mean, Hal got probably the lion's share of the work, but he was super, super busy. Absolutely. Earl Palmer I'm talking about. David Kilty, my old bandmate, bass player from my band Trigger, my old buddy, suggested Butch Trucks. Absolutely, Butch and J-Mo, I think, are unsung heroes. Butch especially, I think, because of, and I think J-Mo would be the first to tell you this, like what he brought to the Allman Brothers. He was that foundation that allowed J-Mo to play the way he played so freely. J-Mo was sort of like the Elvin Jones to Butch's, like, bluesy, rock solid, shuffly groove that Butch laid down for the band. I mean, it never moved. And that allowed J-Mo to just have all that independence and all that freedom to play all the cool stuff that he played. Lynette, Larry London, yes, excellent. Larry, left us way too early, almost 30 years ago, and I would definitely consider Larry, kind of an unsung hero. But again, if you follow country drumming and you know who these guys are, then you'd certainly know who Larry was and the records, and and I see Craig Cranth being suggested there, Willie Ornelas, Graham Laird, definitely. Good ones, Bob Harson, good suggestions, all great drummers, and you've heard them all a million times. One of my favorite songs that Graham Laird plays on is Santana's Winning, and listen to that song, break that song down and try to play it. It's a killer. It's a totally badass tune. Graham Laird, yeah, great song. I'm winning. Yeah, don't forget. My friend Jimmy Capone just said, don't forget Butch Miles, Count Basie's drummer for many years. Fabulous, fabulous drummer. Butch is, and my good buddy, a phenomenal drummer. Just wow. I mean, kicks ass. I know he won't mind me describing him that way, because when you hear him play, there's so much power. He kicks ass. Narada Michael Walden, yes, and Larry played with Elvis. He sure did. Gary Husband. Look at all these names. All right, see? I knew you guys would help me out with this. This is great. It's quite all right, Christy. It's quite all right. We almost didn't start without you, but here we are. Sonny Payne. Yep, absolutely. All right, I'm going to see if I can find some other names here. Michael Welch gave me some good ones, though. Yeah, Bobby Graham, Phil Seaman, Bobby Caldwell, Alan Dawson, the great Alan Dawson from right here in Boston. Taught at Berkeley for many years and taught privately. And I got to know him a little bit toward the end of his life, and he was a wonderful man and just maybe one of the greatest players of his kind, and that he's one of those guys that was equal parts incredible player, but also teacher. And, you know, it's not often. There are so many great players, I should say, that aren't always the best teachers, just because there's a lot more to teaching than you might think, even if you're a fabulous player. But Ellen had that great combination of being, you know, just a real highly respected drummer, but also just one of the greatest teachers. Yeah, Scott Mercado, Candlebox. Good to see you, Scott. Thanks for joining. Yep, Jerry Brown, another one. Ed Green. Wow, look at all these names people are throwing out there. Mike Clark, absolutely. Yep. Mike Powers, did you study with Alan? You probably did, I'm guessing. I didn't, unfortunately, but I spoke with him on the phone when I was about 18 or 19, and I asked if he would take me on as a student, and when I told him I couldn't read music, he said no. And I told him that story many years later. He didn't remember it, but he acknowledged it. Well, yeah, he said, I didn't take on students that couldn't read music. I mean, he was way more advanced than I was, obviously, for me to study with him. So, Chester Thompson, another great suggestion. Monster drummer. Yeah, all the tall drummers: Barrymore Barlow, Clive Bunker, Doane Perry, who played with Tull for many, many years. Mark Craney, of course. You did for 2 years, Mike. That's cool. You studied with Alan. That's great. I bet that was amazing for you. David Kilty, Larry Carpenito. Yes, Larry. So that's a little joke between David Kilty and myself. Larry was the drummer in the band Trigger before me. So that was, yeah, I replaced him. And so some might say he was underrated, an unsung hero. Anyway, yeah, Scott Hessler, Mark Craney, Doane Perry. There you go. Yep, two of Tull's finest drummers. The great Mark Craney, also a left-handed drummer. Hey, I fixed the green screen. My friend Suzanne Morissette we'd been going back and forth about how to fix that green screen thing, and there seemed to be no fix for a while. And then, Penny Lane was the one that actually found the fix, but it made it really bright and shiny. But now it's back to normal. It's back to the. So if you're doing these at home, you can now flip the camera without it turning green like it did on me. So, all right, Rod Morgenstein, another great left-handed drummer. So, the other thing I wanted to mention, we can keep talking about drummers too. Yeah, Steve Jordan, I wouldn't say isn't unsung. I wouldn't consider Steve Jordan unsung. I consider him to be, you know, at the absolute, you know, top of, you know, right amongst the top guys in the world. So, but if we can all call anybody anything we want. We can say they're unsung, they're not unsung, but Steve Jordan is certainly worth talking about because, again, another incredible talent, drummer, producer. But, you know, speaking of Steve Jordan, I've been listening to the Rolling Stones channel a lot on the Sirius radio station. They're doing like a limited time Rolling Stones channel. So they're playing a lot of the Keith Richards solo stuff, of which Steve Jordan played. And it leads me to Charlie Drayton, who, again, I wouldn't consider Charlie unsung because I just think of him as one of my heroes. Charlie is just an absolute monster drummer. But Charlie is on a bunch of the Keith Richards. Him and Steve Jordan switch between bass and drums on those songs. So, but I would say certainly the names you guys are Chad Wackerman, Bobby Colomby, and Jeremy Stacy, all phenomenal drummers and musicians. And Jeremy, you know, I knew Jeremy played. Jeremy's a very good friend of mine. I knew he played some keyboard, but until I saw him with King Crimson last year, he played. I mean, you had Gavin Harrison and Pat Mustelato also playing drums. You know, the three-drummer assault, and so that afforded Jeremy time to sit and play keyboards a lot during the night, and played great keyboards, man. He sounded awesome. So, you know, I mean, when you got Gavin and Pat holding it down, you can, you know, Jeremy can afford to step back and play some cool keyboard parts. So, very talented guy and a good guy. We've had a pint a time or two when I've been in London and in the States. He's a great guy to hang out with. But I was going to mention that my old friend Ron Dunnett of Dunnett Drums, George Way Drums, sent me this awesome care package this week. He threatened to do this a couple of weeks ago, and I had forgotten all about it, but I got two sets of his famous snare wires, some 42s, and some 20s, and these are like gold plated. Look at that. A couple of his specially made Ron Dunnett drum heads, snare bottoms. So I think the message Ron was sending me is, don't use these wires with just any snare bottom. So I won't, Ron. I just have to figure out which drums I'm going to put these on. These two sets of wires and heads and some straps. But the funniest thing is, he sent me a couple of drum keys. Yeah, Johnny V, absolutely. Ed Soph. Sorry, I moved away from Jay Belrose. Yes. Good names. Good names. Sent me a couple of really cool drum keys so I can finally tune my drums after all these years. Got this one. But this one stumped me. I didn't know what to do with it, so I texted him yesterday and I said, because I'm like, I don't want to break this thing. It's on there. I'm thinking, does this come off? And there's a slot there to use it, but no, it didn't. So I texted him, and he texted me back, and he said, you just have to, there's a real strong suction with that rubber gasket. You just have to pull it off, which I did, and voila, it's a pretty nifty drum key. So fits my Rogers set pretty nicely. I moved out the Gretsch, by the way, and greatest key ever, Michael Vosby. Thank you. Well, I'm not thanking you because you didn't send it to me, but it's a pretty amazing key. I'm looking forward to the day when I can take this on an actual gig and use it to tighten up my hardware and tune my drums and whatever. And best of all, I can't lose it. Well, I probably could, but most likely I won't. Anyway, I dug the Rogers out from behind my stack of drums this week and put them in the playing spot. I played them a couple of times this week, not a lot. And I need to get back to playing, but it is a cool key. And thank you, Ron Dunnett, for your kindness and your generosity and your friendship. Good guy. All right. Yeah, Michael Vosmean, good suggestions, Johnny V and Ed Soph, Unsung drummers. What about, what do people think of Jamie Oldacre, who played on a bunch of Eric Clapton's earlier records? How many of you guys are hip to Jamie? He played on the Slow Hand record, which had a whole bunch of hits like Cocaine and Lay Down Sally and The Core, Wonderful Tonight, some really beautiful, subtle, playing on that. He's got that like swish knocker with the rivets that you hear. You hit it and you hear that, the rivets rattling. I love that song. I do. I love just, ballads and just really nice, subtle playing. So Jamie's a big hero of mine. Jamie Oldacre. I'm going to take a look in Max Weinberg. Yeah, Lay Down Sally. Absolutely. That's a great song. He's also on I Shot the Sheriff from the record before Slow Hand. What's it called? 461 Ocean Boulevard or something? The Clapton record from the early 70s. Is Jamie. Oklahoma guy. That's right. He's from not Oklahoma City, but Jamie was with Frampton also. Well, he may have been. He's had a lot of drummers, Peter Frampton. I know that my pal Rick Murata played with him for a while too. As we said, Joe, and of course John Siomis, and Jack Bruno, who we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Jack was with him one summer when I saw him. Richie Hayward, great catch on Richie Hayward. Another guy, Tulsa, thank you, from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Jamie Oldacre. Anyway, Richie was for anybody who doesn't know, Richie was Little Feat's drummer. And, you know, definitely a drummer's drummer. I mean, if you're a drummer and you've been around for a little while, you're hip to Richie Hayward, and you dig his playing because he was, you know, absolutely a gem. But a couple more guys that are in Max Weinberg's book. If you haven't got this, you should definitely check it out, The Big Beat. Hudson Music, my buddy Rob Wallace, I believe now is reprinting this book or has reprinted it. So I want to say it's available again. Max wrote this book, put it out in 1984, if I remember correctly. And that's how long ago that's when I got this book. But he has Johnny B in there, Hal Blaine, Dino Danelli. I would put him in that sort of unsung hero category. DJ Fontana, Elvis's longtime drummer, and as Lynette Yorks pointed out, Larry London also played with Elvis, and you know, a lot of guys played with Elvis. Ron Tutt also, Hal Blaine recorded with him. The great Buddy Harmon, Nashville drummer, also recorded with Elvis. I don't think he ever played live with him. DJ did a lot of DJ was the guy in the early days, you know, the live drummer. But, so DJ Russ Kunkel, I mean, any day you listen to the radio, you're going to hear a half a dozen to a dozen hit songs with Russ Kunkel playing drums, whether it's James Taylor, whether it's a Linda Ronstadt song, whether it's Stevie Nicks. I mean, you know, he's from the late 60s until yesterday, he's played with everybody. The Bob Seger song, Even Now, I mean, that's Russ Kunkel. You know, he's just played with everybody. Ringo Starr, I don't recognize that name. Charlie Watts, nope, don't know. Dave Clark is in this book. I don't know if I'd call Dave Clark an unsung hero because word on the street is Dave didn't actually play on the Dave Clark 5 records, but he did sing all the songs. That counts for something. But he, you know, he did sort of get up there and play live. So good for him. Kenney Jones, great drummer. Somewhat of an unsung hero. Earl Palmer, we talked about. I wouldn't consider Bernard Purdie an unsung hero because we all know how great he is. He's played on a million great songs, great records. Russ is on the cover of Drumhead. I got my magazine, Bill. I haven't read it yet, but I did see that he's on the cover of Drumhead. Roger Hawkins, we talked about earlier. Roger Hawkins is just amazing. He's one of the guys that I wish I had been able to connect with during my time at Zildjian. We had a sales rep that covered Alabama, a guy named Jim Greenhill, who's maybe watching this right now, guitar player, really great guy. And he knew somebody who worked at Muscle Shoals or knew somebody who knew Roger and tried to put us together. And he may have passed along my name and number to Roger, and maybe Roger chose not to call. But Jerry Shirley, sure, absolutely, sure, Jerry Shirley. Another great unsung hero. But Roger Hawkins is a phenomenal drummer. Jim Keltner, of course, again, I'd put him in that category of you know, guys that I wouldn't say are unsung because everybody knows who Jim Keltner is. You better know who Jim Keltner is. And last, Levon Helm, who might fall into that category because I don't know if enough people really know who Levon Helm is. Of course, the singer and drummer for the band. Fabulous. I got to meet Levon one time. Spoke with him on the phone a bunch of times during the 90s and the 2000s. And, you know, he never had never had an endorsement with Zildjian or any company during all those years with the band. And then, you know, he sort of went back out. He probably never actually got off the road. But anyway, in the early 90s, I was contacted by the percussionist that was playing in his band. Gosh, I'm embarrassed. I'm going to remember his name in a minute. But anyway, I worked out a connection to get him and Levon hooked up with Zildjian, and I sent Levon some cymbals, and he played mostly A's. I want to say toward the end, maybe because the A's were so heavy there, kind of toward the end of Levon's time, that I might have sent him a K or two, something a little thinner, more like an old A. And forget the year, but it was maybe around the mid to late 2000s. He played in Boston and played with the Black Crowes. Levon Helm and, I'm trying to think of what he called the band. Maybe it was just the Levon Helm band. His daughter was in the band. Anyway, got to meet him and hang with him, and I wish I got a picture with him, but it was just so cool. He was just so nice. His smile was like from ear to ear on his face, and invited me up to Woodstock, and I never made it up there while he was alive. So anyway, Levon Helm, the great Levon Helm. Yeah, Anton Fig, Sean Pelton, two great New York drummers, played on a million records, absolutely. Yeah, Anton, I would say, is probably a bit of an unsung hero in that he's played on a bunch of records, even to this day, but like in the 80s and 90s, he was on a bunch of records in New York that you might not know he was on, but like the hit songs from Cyndi Lauper, and of course he kind of ghost drummed in some of the Kiss records. And okay, now we're talking about Al Jackson Jr. Yes, absolutely, the great Al Jackson Jr. Dave Garibaldi, again, I would debate that he's unsung, because I think you better know who David Garibaldi is, but sure, you could say to some percentage of the world he's unsung. But Ronnie Zito, I don't think I know who Ronnie Zito is, I'm ashamed to say. Wow. Rick, hit me to Ronnie Zito. Wowie. Man, I'm gonna have to look Ronnie Zito up. Yeah, we talked about Richie Hayward, we talked about John Guerin, we talked about John Ramsey, Boston drummer, teacher at Berkeley, very, very highly acclaimed teacher at Berkeley, and I wouldn't say he's an unsung hero, because he's a hero as far as I'm concerned. Yep, Carlos Vega, talked about Carlos. I'm trying to think, there were a couple more guys that come to mind. Charlie Drayton just tuned in, and we were just talking about Charlie. I was just talking about Charlie a few minutes ago as being maybe not an unsung hero, but certainly one of my heroes. Yep, and Jamie Oldacre. So we're all kind of on the same page here, talking about a lot of the same guys. Yeah. But I definitely would put Jamie Oldacre in that category, you know. There was someone else that came to mind in the midst of all that, and I didn't think. Oh, okay. Another drummer that I've mentioned from time to time, and boy, I'm really fidgety. Floyd Sneed, who was the drummer with Three Dog Night, and just a really cool, funky drummer. And I remember, okay, as well. Okay, Ronnie Zico is a mentor. Okay, Charlie, Zico or Zito? You're welcome, John Ramsey, and thanks for the kind words about my drum room / drum shop. But anyway, Floyd Sneed was one of those guys that was a real pioneer in terms of playing in a rock band, but playing stuff that nobody was playing back then, like all that funky syncopated stuff, like on AM radio hit songs, like Shambhala or Black and White, just all those tunes, all those great Three Dog Night songs. And I remember I was traveling, this was in the early 90s, might have been 91, 92, traveling with Dennis Chambers on a clinic tour. And in those days, we used to carry, both he and I had portable CD players, and we all remember those. They were, they were about as hip as you could be at that time. Like you had this collection of your favorite 10 or 12 CDs. You had to like pick out the ones you wanted to bring with you. And I'd keep it, I don't think I carried a computer in those days, but on my carry-on on the plane, I'd have my little portable CD player, my headphones, of course, and a bunch of CDs. And I remember I was listening to Three Dog Night, and Dennis, of course, was always curious what I was listening to, and I let him borrow it. And he was hip to Three Dog Night. He was totally hip to it and remembered like when she started listening. And I remember that night at the clinic, wherever we were, he mentioned Discman. It was a Sony Discman, exactly. I have it here somewhere. I had one, the first one I had was so great. It was really heavy in weight, and it had like it was one of the first ones that had like an added extra bass boost to it. Before they all did. This was like, it was like $289 to buy it. And it sounded so good, had great high output, so I could play it really loud. On a plane, you have to have it loud because of the noise. And then it just kind of crapped out on me, and I bought a cheaper one. They were all cheap at that point, it feels like. By the time they were just mass produced. Anyway, I could go on about that. They just, you know, the sound was inferior. They weren't as loud. The bass wasn't as pronounced. So anyway, I remember that night at the clinic, Dennis talking about Floyd Sneed for like, you know, a half an hour or 20 minutes, like going on about how great he was. And I, you know, probably a lot of people in that room that night didn't even know who he was, and maybe got hip to him just from Dennis talking about him. So had to have the bass boost. Yeah, you absolutely had to have the bass boost. You couldn't listen to those, especially on a plane, you know, where you've just got all that noise anyway, and it would usually suck the highs and the lows right out. It was just all mid-range if you were sitting on a plane. So Clive Bunker, yes, we talked about all the different Jethro Tull drummers, but worth mentioning Clive again. And Sandy, maybe you know the answer to this. Was it Clive Bunker that played on Thick as a Brick, or was that Barrymore Barlow? My friend Mike Mahoney would know. My friend Mike Mahoney is the biggest Jethro Tull fan probably in the world. I've talked about Mike before. He's the guy that gave me my first snare drum, my next door neighbor, my best buddy, and really sort of helped along my drumming career by giving me a drum when all I had was a pair of sticks. And it was later that year that I got my first drum set. But he was listening to Jethro Tull in the early 70s and would totally expose me to all that music. And he used to tell me that this album has this drummer on it, and that was so different and new to me, because the bands I was listening to at that time, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Who, whatever, they all had the same drummer on all, you know, on all the records and all the songs. So to have this friend of mine playing like one album that had this drummer on it, and then another album that had a different drummer, although they sounded pretty close to me, to my young, naive ears, you know. I think Clive was earlier. I think you're right. I think Barrymore was maybe early to mid 70s, or Mark Craney came in the band in the late 70s, or maybe even around 80. I saw Mark with the band around 80 or 81. And I definitely saw Tull with Barrymore Barlow in the 70s, the mid 70s. So I think you're right. Clive Bunker was probably Thick as a Brick in Aqualung, I think. So, yes, Richie Hayward on the Robert Plant solo stuff, Little by Little. That tune is amazing. Yeah, I mean, just, it's funny, you know, I didn't know that was Richie when I first heard it. It sounded at the time like Mel Gaynor, because the Simple Minds were out that same summer of '85, and it sounded like the sound of the drums and the style of drumming, like on, you know, Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me. I thought it might be him. I didn't know, you know, I didn't assume it was, but I found out later it was Richie Hayward. And then again, I put it together. Well, yeah, sure, it sounds like Richie. His drums just sound a little different, a little bit more sort of produced and crisp. He always had a good sound, but they really, you know, that Robert Plant record really kind of, the drums were so out front. Sounded so good. Wow, we're already 45 minutes in. Hey, before I forget, I want to mention Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, the 20th, I'm going to have two guests with me. My old friend Harry McCarthy, who presently lives in Nashville. He runs Drum Paradise Nashville, but Harry and I have known each other 35 years, since the mid-1980s when we both lived in Los Angeles. And Jeff Siomis, who still lives in LA. He's currently Ringo's drum tech, Jeff. Sort of more or less retired from the business other than working for Ringo. But I'll confirm that on Wednesday. I'll ask him that. But I'm pretty sure that some years ago, he decided to basically get off the road, and he's worked for Ringo since 1989. So he basically just goes out and tours with Ringo, and that's the extent. But Harry works. He still to this day is working. In addition to running his business from Paradise, he also works for Keith Urban and techs for Keith Urban's drummer, Seth Rosh. But more than that, Harry's kind of in the Keith Urban camp, and that he's really, a big part of that whole organization. Keith has a place in Australia, but also, lives in Nashville. So anyway, the history with Harry and Jeff, without taking away from what they're going to talk about on Wednesday, is they had a business together called Drum Paradise in Los Angeles back in the 80s. And I met both Harry and Jeff separately when they were each doing their own thing. Harry was working as Harvey Mason's cartage guy. He had a couple of clients, Harvey Mason, Rick Marotta. He'll tell us more about that when we talk on Wednesday. And Jeff I knew as Myron Grombacher's drum tech and some other guys around LA. And then they joined forces and started Drum Paradise, which basically they took over Los Angeles. Their cartage company became the company. They had everybody as a client. And what's going to be cool about having them on the show, I think, is they're going to be able to recall the heyday of that scene, which is, I remember it just from the standpoint of, being there and watching it and working in the business. But I mean, they're going to be able to talk about what it was like setting up probably 4 or 5 guys a day in different studios around town, and what that whole scene was like. So I'm excited to have 2 of my friends, Harry McCarthy and Jeff Chonis, on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday at 2 o'clock. So definitely tune in for that. I'll send more Facebook reminders out there to all you guys, to the point where it drives you crazy. Lynette, you love Keith Urban and Seth. Yes, I met Seth about a year ago when I was in Nashville. Harry told me a lot about him, and really, really nice guy. He came to Rick's. Rick Marotta had done a master class at Harry's shop, and Seth came and hung out. Super, super nice guy, and I know he's a heck of a drummer. So thank you, Matthias. Love right back to you. I hope all is well. Thick as a brick, Barrymore Barlow. Okay, thank you, Nick. I stand corrected, not Clive Bunker. So that must have been later on to where Barrymore was in the band. Okay. You met Harry too, Lynette. Well, I might just be a little bit jealous of you, that is, because I thought I was the only one that knew Harry, but no, I'm kidding. Harry's my good buddy. So anyway, yeah, and Jeff, I would have, if things had been normal, I would have seen Jeff in a couple of weeks, because Ringo was scheduled to play here first week of June, so about 2 or 3 weeks from now. And Ringo is celebrating his 80th birthday this year, July 7th, I think. Someone confirmed that, but anyway, I know he's going to be 80 this summer, and I was going to pick out a nice little gift to present Ringo, and anyway, it's been postponed until next year. In fact, originally, Ringo's show was a week before the Stones were playing in Buffalo, so I was going to see 2 of my absolute favorite drummers and heroes like a week apart from each other. And I remember one other time when that happened. I forget the year. Might have been sometime in the late 90s. I forget, but I had seen them about a week apart from each other. And I'm trying to remember who I saw first, but I gave whoever I saw second, I gave them the other guy's regards, and they got a kick out of that. And I was like, oh, when did you see him? And I said, oh, he played here last week. I think I had seen Ringo first, and he said, give Charlie my regards or something. So I didn't try. Where did you see Ringo? Oh, how is he? How is he? Well, he's very well. He's Ringo. But that was, I don't know, maybe, gosh, it could be almost 20 years. I don't know. It's frightening how fast time is going by. Some friends of ours, my friend Ellen Mahoney, Hillsinger, her married name, put a picture up on Facebook yesterday from 2 years ago. We were all at the Jackson Browne show in Boston. Fritz Lewak and Bob Glob, my buddies, the rhythm section. Fritz on drums and Bob on bass. And my bandmates came with me, Neil Porter and Grand Theft Audio bandmates, that is. Grand Theft Audio has to be highlighted there. Neil Porter and Paul Ginelli and Paul Candelori and myself went to the show, and Ellen posted it the other day, and I'm like, I can't believe that was 2 years ago, but it's frightening. Wow. I better start practicing with a mask. Yeah, David, you're right. I'm thinking I might. So that when I sing through the mask, I'll learn how to breathe and articulate my words so that you can understand what I'm saying through the mask. Actually, I think you can actually talk through the mask and not worry about it being too muffled sounding. So I'll try that. Anyway, never heard of Grand Theft Audio, Penny Lynn. Well, you should come check us out sometime. We're pretty good. Pretty good little outfit. Anyway, that particular night, Jackson Browne, it was a rainy, crazy, like torrential rain that just descended upon us at 5 o'clock, and it finally stopped, I think, by the time the show started, but it was crazy. I couldn't find a place anywhere along the waterfront. It's at this place that's called Blue Hills Pavilion now. I think it is. I forget. It could be something else now. It used to be Blue Hills Pavilion. And there's all these great restaurants along the way, but of course, on a rainy, crazy night, you couldn't get in any of them. So I'm just walking around waiting for my bandmates to show up. And I think Charlene was supposed to come with us and didn't come at the last minute, so it was just me and the boys. But it was a great show. Hello, Martin. We had a great time. Didn't get to see Jackson afterward. He was hanging out with some other folks, doing some sort of a like private meet and greet. So, oh well. But I'd put Fritz Lewak as a unsung hero. He's on a bunch of the early Melissa Etheridge like hit songs from the 90s, 80s and 90s. And he's been with Jackson Browne since, I want to say 93, almost 30 years. Like the early 90s, he started playing with Jackson. And Jackson doesn't record as much as he used to, but he still tours a whole bunch, and Fritz is his guy, and a really, really great drummer. But check him out on some of the old Melissa Etheridge stuff too. Great drummer. Thank you very much, John Ramsey. I appreciate that. John Ramsey, as I mentioned, is a phenomenal drummer, a true jazz historian, Art Blakey historian, in fact. As I said, he's one of the professors at Berklee, teaches at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and for a number of years he was the chairman, the chair of percussion at Berklee. But I know now he's playing more, and he's got lots more time to be a drummer and still teach at Berklee. But John lives not too far from one of the places we play all the time, the Brickyard in Woburn. And this was several years ago. We're playing, and if I remember correctly, it was someone's birthday. So of course we're playing the song "Birthday" by the Beatles. Just we played like a few bars just to kind of. Someone would say, "Can you guys play Birthday?" Sure. And it's a small place, and if you can picture the layout, you play to a short wall. So you've got like the drums. I set up about a foot away from the wall behind me, and there's enough room for like a pathway for people to walk in front of me, and the whole band sets up in a row basically. It's that tight, and then it's wide this way, but short to the wall that we play at. So anyway, so playing that, and John Ramsey just retired from Berklee. Congratulations! Oh man, I'm so happy for you. You're gonna love it. Berklee was great, but I'm so happy for you. But anyway, John Ramsey comes walking down and stops right in front of me and like puts his face, because you can do that because I'm right there. The whole band is right there. Puts his face right up to me and like opens his eyes wide, and I felt like I was gonna like pass out. not only did it just take me by surprise, but it was John Ramsey. Like, anyway, I think he says, like, what's that ride somebody you're playing? Typical drummer. He's like, sound great, man. What's that ride? I want it. So anyway, it's a fun night. Thank you, Tommy. I don't know about grooving, but I'll try to keep grooving. I'll keep trying to groove. Tristan Bowden is watching. Okay. He's another guy that I had in my mental list of great drummers that again, and I wouldn't not just because Tris is watching that I'm going to say this, but I don't consider Tris unsung because I think of him as one of the all-time greats. Tris played on all the Kenny Loggins. I mean, most all the Kenny Loggins hits of the '80s, from the '80s. I mean, all those, you know, Footloose, and he's playing with Kenny now. He's back playing with Kenny Loggins. But like all those songs you hear on the radio all the time, that's Tris. And then in 1990, he joined Chicago and played with them up until just a few years ago. I mean, close to 30 years with Chicago, and now he's back with Kenny, and a phenomenal drummer, can play all styles. I mean, he's equally comfortable playing Latin as he is playing like just a, you know, a backbeat, just a solid, you know, just a, you know, solid backbeat. In fact, I want to say Tris also played with Al Jarreau in the 80s. I mean, he played with everybody. He was a session guy in LA when I first met him. And we got real tight when he got with Chicago, because I'd see him every summer when they toured. So anyway, Tris, I love you, brother. And besides him being an amazing drummer, he's one of the greatest humans I've ever known. Just an absolutely wonderful guy. Love him. Phoenix Rivera. Wow. Okay, all the cats are watching here. So I'm not going to go too long today because there's always that, you know, leaving on a high note kind of thing. If this is even a high note. But anyway, go back and scroll through some of the names we came up with here. And for anybody who doesn't recognize who some of these names are we've talked about, I think it'd be really good to, I'm trying to do more of that during this time. Tristan Wally, yeah, exactly. Wilfredo Reyes Jr., great drummer and percussionist. And when Tris was playing in Chicago, Wally was playing percussion. I think Wally's now playing drums and percussion, or maybe they have added a percussionist. I don't know, but they were a great team. It was always a thrill to see Tris with Chicago, and when they toured many summers with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and that was pretty amazing. A couple of times I saw them touring with Huey Lewis and the News. So Bill Gibson, you know, Huey Lewis's drummer, and Tris on the same bill, which was always a gas. Jim, you just said my name to your wife? Okay, wow. Well, you know, Jim, I felt something in the back of my neck kind of stinging a little bit. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. Anyway, so, not 2 seconds ago. Wow. Well, before we call it a day, I'll remind everybody, you don't want to miss Wednesday, the 20th, 4 days from now. Harry McCarthy, Jeff Siomis, two of the, you know, I mean, there are a lot of great drum techs, and I'm going to talk to more drum techs too. I think that'd be cool to have guys like Don McCauley, who's Charlie Watts' tech, have him come on. There's a whole bunch of really great, I'll try to get Yard. I might have to pay Yard a few quid. He doesn't do anything for free. So I may have to owe him a pint or two for next time I go to London. But I'd love to get more guys like that just to talk about drummers they've worked for, what they ask for, what they do, you know, what it's like to tech for people like that. I mean, I know a lot of these guys and have had the good fortune of hearing it from them, but I think you guys would enjoy hearing stories about that stuff. So we'll do more of that stuff. But as I said, this coming Wednesday, it's going to be Harry McCarthy, who, and just to give you a little rundown, Harry's worked for Steve Gadd, Rick Marotta, of course. I mentioned Harvey Mason. Worked for Max Weinberg when Springsteen sort of resumed as the E Street Band in the late 90s, I think around 99, when they sort of all got back together again. Great to see you too, Tris. I love you, bro. I'm going to give you a call and catch up with you. But it's great to see you, brother. Love to you and Mary. Sending you a big hug. A virtual hug. So yeah, Harry's worked with everybody. As I said, he worked with Max Weinberg from 99 until like 2012, and then he started working for Keith Urban at that point. And he's been there for 8 years. And as I said, Jeff tech for a whole bunch of people throughout the 80s, and since '89 he's been Ringo's guy. He's Ringo. He's the only guy Ringo wants teching for him, and Ringo's the only guy he'll tech for, basically, according to Jeff. So pretty cool. I'm seeing a lot of votes for Yard. Okay, we're gonna get Yard. It's too bad we can't get Yard. Maybe I'll get, yeah, we'll have Yard on a, what am I saying? We'll have him on a Zoom chat so you'll be actually able to hear his voice. He has the most endearing, wonderful, English accent. Very, very soft-spoken, very polite, British. Anyway. Todd Zuckerman's tech. Sure, there's a lot of techs out there, so that could keep me pretty busy for a while. There's another guy that's not on Facebook that's a very old, dear friend of mine that I keep in touch with named Gary Grimm, and it just so happens Peter Erskine mentioned him the other day. He was teching for Peter when Peter did the Steely Dan tour in '93, and Gary had worked for Jack Bruno for many tours with Tina Turner and Joe Cocker, and Gary's definitely like one of those. He worked for Jeff Beccaro. I met him in the '80s when he was working for Jeff, and Gary's one of those real seasoned guys, like Yard and like Harry, and like Jeff too. But like a guy he's been around. These are the top echelon guys as far as I'm concerned, and I don't mean any disrespect for any other drum techs that are out there, because there's some amazing drum techs, but the guys like Yard and Gary and Harry, Jeff, and there's a few others. Timmy Doyle, who worked for Jimmy Chamberlain. Timmy Doyle, and Timmy also worked for Joey Kramer. A whole bunch of people. Chris Gott, who goes by the nickname Feely, and of course I mentioned Don McCauley, who's Charlie Watts' tech. These guys are all the cream of the crop guys. Love you too, Tris. Stay well, buddy. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Carlos Guzman. Yes, Carlos, great drum tech. And Carlos is like a guy that's like a production guy and tour manager, and can wear a lot of hats. As can Harry, actually. Harry could definitely do all that stuff. He's a real organized guy, Harry McCarthy. And so could Jeff. So there we go. All right. So before I sign off, yeah, somebody commented on my Speed Racer shirt. I still love this show. And I guess it was in the 60s. I used to watch it when I got home from school. I was in the 4th or 5th grade. Last I heard, Gary Grimm is the shit. That's right. He was with Jeff. Plays keyboards for bands too. Yeah. Yeah. Gary is great. Good guy too. Anyway, I was going to say, I think Speed Racer's retired now. I don't know that he's racing anymore, but hopefully he still has the Mach 5. I didn't know if it was the Mach 5 or the Mark 5. I think it's the Mach, M-A-C-H, Mach 5, right? All right. Lauren Wheaton, thank you. Yeah, I knew I was forgetting a very important name. Lauren Wheaton, who often joins us on these shows. So hopefully if he watches this later in the archive, he'll hear me mention his name, Lauren Wheaton. Go back a long time with Lauren. Lauren was Steve Smith's drum tech in Journey, going back to the 80s. With Steve, of course, Neil Peart's longtime tech, and Keith Carlock, and a whole bunch of guys. So thanks, John Ramsey. Thanks for joining. All right, Richie and Rich. It's good to see you guys. I'm going to sign off now. I got a drum lesson in about 2 hours. I need to work on some stuff. But I'm going to treat myself to a cold beer right now. It's about 70-something degrees. It's pretty warm here. Nice breeze coming off the water. Going to sit out on my deck with my sticks and my practice pad and have a cold Carlsberg from Denmark. So there you go. That was me attempting to play on my book. But I'll close it with a damn bracelet. My Rogers Power Sonic snare drum. See you guys Wednesday, 2 o'clock. Don't miss that one. That's going to be really cool. Thanks for watching Peter and Adam the other day. I know it went a long time. I'm going to have another one with those guys, but I think individually, so it doesn't go for 2 hours. So each guy can talk a lot, because if they both talk a lot, it's going to be another 2 hours, and that's a long time. See you soon. Be safe, everybody. We're almost through this. I can feel it. I can feel it. Maybe a few more weeks, and things will start to feel a little bit back to normal. Let's hope so. All right. God bless you all. Stay safe.